Welcome to Whispered Clues. Tonight, Sherlock Holmes faces the impossible, the man who never cast a shadow. A riddle of light, lies, and vanished truth. Let the mystery begin. The first thing that broke the quiet of Baker Street was the tapping of a walking cane against the threshold. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, each with a pause that suggested neither impatience nor hesitation, but an eerie precision. I was halfway through trimming my pen when Holmes, who had been motionless in the armchair for nearly an hour, said without looking up, "That will be a man who has rehearsed his entrance." The cane tapped once more, as though to confirm his diagnosis. I rose, opened the door, and found a tall gentleman whose features seemed at war with the gaslight. His face, though sharply defined, lacked that ordinary play of shadow that falls across human countenance. The light struck him, yet his cheek and temple reflected it evenly, as if the lamp could find no contour to hold. He removed his hat in a single clean motion. "Dr. Watson, I presume?" Before I could answer, Holmes's voice carried from behind me. "You are not accustomed to sunlight, sir. The line of your collar tells me you live by night or in a room shuttered from it. Pray, come in and enlighten us if that is not too cruel a verb." The visitor smiled faintly, revealing teeth so white they appeared almost luminous. "My name is Mr. Alton Vale, and I fear the word may be more apt than you know." He entered, bringing with him a faint metallic sound, not of coins or keys, but of something small and fragile striking glass within his coat. As he seated himself opposite Holmes, I noticed how the firelight behind him cast no distinct outline upon the carpet. It was as if the flames, too, refused acquaintance with his form. Holmes's gaze sharpened. "A physicist might find you instructive, Mr. Vale. You bring no shadow. Is that your doing, or has nature withdrawn the privilege?" The man's lips twitched. "I have long ceased to question why, Mr. Holmes. My concern tonight is not my reflection, but another absence. There has been a disappearance, sudden, total, and of the most unaccountable kind. My associate, Mr. Edwin Mortlake, has vanished from his rooms in Bloomsbury without trace or footprint. Only one thing remains, a stain upon the wallpaper, shaped like a human silhouette, as if the man had been burned out of existence." The sound of the clock on the mantelpiece filled the silence that followed. It ticked evenly, insistently, as if measuring not time but disbelief. Holmes leaned forward, the gleam in his eyes brightened by the reflected fire. "Describe the stain," he said. "It is faint, yet complete. Shoulders, head, the faintest curve of the spine. The pattern halts abruptly at the feet, as though the floor refused to accept what the wall endured." I have brought a portion of the paper itself. He reached into his coat and withdrew a rolled section of wall covering. As he unrolled it, a brittle crackle filled. The air and the shape emerged pale grey against yellowed paper, disturbingly human. Holmes touched the edge with a gloved finger. "There is a smell," he murmured, "sulphurous, but with something floral beneath, perhaps lavender oil. A blend not born of accident." Vale nodded. Mr. Mortlake was fond of distilling perfumes. He believed sense could reveal truth about the mind. "Then he pursued an art most dangerous to vanity," Holmes replied. "Watson, you recall the aphorism of Paracelsus that every essence contains both cure and poison? It may be that Mr. Mortlake learned the balance too late." As he spoke, the gas lamp flickered, and in that tremor of light I thought again of the strange absence around our visitor, that failure of shadow. Holmes noticed it too, his eyes moving toward the floor, then back to Vale's face. "I take it," he said quietly, "that you have come not only to find your friend, but to prove you are not to blame for his fate." Vale's expression tightened. "Then you know already, Mr. Holmes, that suspicion falls upon me." "I know," Holmes replied, that the constable who first entered the room must have been a man of imagination, and that imagination, when untethered by reason, breeds fear. Tell me who first noticed your lack of shadow? Vale's eyes drifted toward the fire. It was Mortlake himself. He said it during our final evening together. We were testing a new fragrance, one he called Oblivion. He remarked that under that light I seemed not to exist. I laughed. He did not. Holmes's hand rose slightly, signalling me to note the detail. You will remain in London tonight, Mr. Vale? Yes. I have taken rooms at the Criterion. Good. You will hear from me before dawn. Watson and I shall visit Bloomsbury within the hour. Bring no companion, and make no inquiry of the police. They will not understand the chemistry of shadows. The metallic chime sounded again as Vale stood. He left behind the scent of iron and violets, a curious conflicting perfume that seemed to cling even after the door closed. Holmes rose only when the street door had shut. He crossed to the mantel, took up his magnifying lens, and examined the wallpaper scrap beneath the lamplight. Watson, he said, we are to pursue a man who may have mastered the art of disappearance more literally than any I have known. And yet it is not the missing man who disturbs me most. Then what does? Holmes looked up, his expression unreadable. That our visitor's shoes were wet from the rain, yet the street outside is dry. The ticking of the clock seemed to deepen, hollow, resonant like footsteps receding into unseen corridors. Holmes was already at the hat stand when I reached for my coat. The rain that had fallen earlier had left only the faintest gleam upon the cobbles, but the air outside held a restless chill, as though the storm had moved upward into the clouds and refused to descend again. The metallic ticking of my watch echoed faintly as we descended the stairs, a rhythm that seemed to answer the clock at Baker Street, continuing its pulse as we entered the cab. Bloomsbury, Holmes told the driver. Hartnell Street. Make haste, but softly. The cab jolted forward, its wheels striking the cobblestones with a percussion like a metronome, marking our thoughts. Holmes sat with his arms folded, the piece of wallpaper rolled between his gloved fingers. The lamplight from passing streets brushed across his face in intervals, each illumination seeming to ignite a new thread of reasoning. You observed, Watson, he said quietly, the absence of shadow about our visitor. You are not mistaken. The light met his body as if it fell upon mist. A trick of reflection perhaps, yet not of nature. There are chemical means of creating diffused reflection upon certain surfaces, even flesh. I turned to him. You believe, then, that Mr. Vale's peculiarity is man-made? Holmes's eyes remained fixed ahead. I believe nothing, but I am aware that Mortlake's experiments in olfactory chemistry may have extended beyond fragrance. Perfumes, Watson, are molecules designed to linger in air. What if one were designed instead to repel it? A man could walk surrounded by his own invisible barrier, scattering light as fog scatters sun. The cab's wheels struck a rut, and for a moment the gas lamp within swung violently, sending the wallpaper fragment fluttering. Holmes caught it mid-air, his reaction as swift as a musician's hand correcting a false note. You see, even the air resists stillness tonight, he murmured. Hartnell Street greeted us with a dull quiet. The houses were tall, narrow, and respectable in their darkness. The constable on duty outside number 14 touched his helmet when Holmes displayed his card. Inspector Gregson's men have already gone, sir. The gentlemen's rooms are sealed. Not against thought, Holmes replied, and we stepped inside. The smell struck me first. Lavender, mingled with the sharp tang of sulphur, as Vale had described. Holmes paused just within the threshold, listening. The faint hum of gas from the lamp above, the creak of the stair, each sound, formed part of that strange, orchestra of silence. He motioned me to keep my voice low. The room was small and orderly. A desk stood near the window. Bottles and flasks occupied a shelf beside a narrow iron-framed bed. And there, upon the far wall, the outline, grey, human, unmistakable, stretched upward like the ghost of smoke arrested in midscape. Holmes approached it with a care I had seen him reserve only for explosives and violin strings. Note, Watson, the edges blurred as though by heat, yet the wallpaper itself is intact. No burning, no tearing. He brought the magnifier close. A residue, fine powder, possibly magnesium oxide. The same is used in photographic flash. So the man was photographed, not by camera. By catastrophe, he stepped back. Something in this room produced intense light, instantaneously, directionally sufficient to bleach pigment. Mortlake's experiments, I suspect, sought to trap scent in a burst of light. Foolish, but inspired. He turned sharply to the table. Several small vials lay arranged in pairs, labelled in delicate script, iris, ambergris, oblivion. Holmes uncorked the last and held it briefly beneath his nose. A faint, metallic sweetness rose, the same aroma that had followed Vale from Baker Street. Oblivion, he repeated softly. A perfume that removes what should remain. Tell me, Watson, what does it mean when a man names his creation after forgetting? I hesitated. Perhaps that he wishes to forget himself. Holmes gave a small approving sound. Precisely. Yet it may be that another wished to erase him instead. As he spoke, the floorboard beneath the window gave a dry creak. Holmes bent instantly, produced his knife and pried up the plank. Beneath lay a folded sheet of paper, browned by dust. He opened it beneath the lamplight. It was a letter half finished, the ink still dense, as though it had been written hours before the disappearance. My dear Vale, I have done it. The formula balances at last between scent and substance. When the light passes through, the sentence ended there, broken by a ragged blot of ink. Holmes's brows tightened, interrupted, either by success or by fear. He replaced the plank, rose, and turned to the door. We must visit the perfumery where these essences were purchased. There is one man in London who could have supplied Mortlake Tobias Furner of Long Acre. If we are fortunate, he will still be working at this hour. As we descended the stair, the faint sound of dripping reached us from the hallway, rhythmic, deliberate, and oddly musical. I traced it to a glass retort upon the lower shelf, cracked, yet still releasing a slow bead of liquid onto the floor. Holmes crouched, dipped his finger, and held it to his nose. "Not water," he said. "Silver nitrate solution. Observe the stain it leaves." The drop on his glove shimmered pale, refusing to darken. "This substance devours shadow, Watson. It may be that Mortlake's experiment required precisely that property to strip away reflection." He rose and moved to the door. "We pursue, my dear fellow, not a murderer, perhaps, but an alchemist who sought to banish visibility itself. If so, Mr. Vale's condition is no miracle. It is contagious." Outside, the street lay hushed. A single carriage rolled past, its wheels whispering through the damp air. The ticking of my watch seemed to echo louder than before, marking each moment with surgical clarity. Holmes stopped abruptly at the curb. "Listen," he said. From somewhere near the corner came the faint click of metal, deliberate, twice repeated like a cane striking stone in measured rhythm. "Vale," Holmes whispered. We moved toward the sound, but the street was empty, save for the pale gaslight trembling on the wet paving. Only the echo remained the same triple cadence that had announced our visitor hours before. Holmes's eyes followed the rhythm as if tracing a signature in air. "He watches us," he said at last, "and yet leaves no trace." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of lavender and sulphur through the fog like a remembered voice. Holmes moved ahead through the mist, like a man tracking scent rather than sound, his steps inaudible yet precise. I followed close behind, the faint odour of lavender guiding us along Hartnell Street. The clicking cane echoed again, fainter now, drawing us toward a narrow alley between two shuttered houses. Holmes raised his hand for silence, and the city seemed to obey. We turned the corner, nothing but a thin wisp of smoke rising from a street drain, and the dim flicker of a gas lamp wavering as if unsettled by an unseen figure. Holmes stooped beside the drain, drew his pocket lens, and examined the iron rim. "Watson," he whispered, observed the residue on the grating. "Silver nitrate again has the same concentration as before. He's near." I leaned closer, but saw only moisture catching the lamplight like quicksilver. Surely this could have washed down from Mortlake's rooms. "Unlikely," Holmes said. "The pattern here is deliberate. Someone poured it drop by drop. A signature written in chemistry rather than ink. A muffled clatter interrupted the sound of glass breaking somewhere farther down the alley. Holmes moved instantly towards it, coat flaring behind him. The scent intensified, that same disturbing blend of iron and violets. When we reached the end of the passage, we found a small apothecary door ajar, its window fractured inward. Holmes entered without hesitation. The bell above the door gave a dull, lifeless chime. Inside, shelves of bottles gleamed faintly under a single gasket. At the counter lay a toppled flask, still trembling from impact. Behind it, a man was crouched on the floor, his hands shielding his face. "Tobias Ferner?" Holmes asked sharply. The man looked up, thin, grey-haired, his spectacles cracked across the bridge. "Good heavens, Mr. Holmes! I thought you were—" He broke off, eyes darting to the doorway. "Who did you expect?" Holmes demanded. Ferner swallowed hard. "A gentleman came not 10 minutes ago. He asked for the same compound I prepared for Mr. Mortlake last week's, silver nitrate mixed with heliotropin oil. I told him it was unsafe." He struck the counter and fled before I could raise help. "Describe him." "Tall, pale, dressed in black, wore gloves though it's not cold." And the chemist hesitated, voice trembling. He cast no shadow when he passed beneath the lamp. Holmes's expression did not change, but I saw his eyes gleam with that terrible clarity that meant deduction had already begun its silent dance. He took nothing. Only a vial of heliotropin, but it shattered in his hand as he left. I heard it break outside. The liquid was gone before I reached the door, as if the street drank it. Holmes crossed swiftly to the shelf, selected a bottle of the same chemical, and unstoppered it. The scent that escaped was sharp, sweet, and unearthly, the smell of something both artificial and intimate, like memory forced into matter. "He meant to stabilize the reaction," Holmes murmured. "Heliotropin binds with light. Watson, it holds scent within its luminous vibrations. Combine it with silver nitrate, and you have a substance that devours shadow but leaves odor. Mortlake's oblivion was no perfume. It was an experiment in visibility. Ferner's face was drained of color." "You mean," Holmes interrupted, "that Mr. Mortlake's disappearance may have been the success of his invention rather than its failure. He may exist, still invisible, yet marked by his own scent." The chemist stared in horror. "That's impossible." Holmes replaced the stopper. "So is a man without a shadow, yet we have both in this case." A metallic clink echoed outside the unmistakable tap of that infernal cane. Holmes was at the door before I could draw breath. "Stay here, Ferner," he said over his shoulder. "Watson, with me?" We emerged into the street just as the sound ceased. The alley was empty once more, save for a faint shimmer in the air near the lamplight, like heat rising from stone. Holmes extended his hand toward it and drew back sharply. "Cold," he muttered. "Freezing, though the night is mild." He turned to me. "Watson, do you see?" I peered into the gaslight. At first, nothing, then a faint outline, wavering, a man-shaped distortion of air, visible only where the light met it. My pulse quickened. "Holmes, good Lord!" He moved forward, one hand outstretched, but the shape dissolved as the gaslight flickered. The next instant, the street was empty again. Holmes exhaled through his teeth. So, he can reflect when he chooses. We pursue a man who walks the border between substance and light. The scent still lingered, that same fusion of lavender and sulphur. Holmes followed it down the alley, his stride measured but quick. Note the pattern, Watson. Each place touched by this odour marks progression. Baker Street, Mortlake's rooms, now the perfumery. He's testing control of his condition like a child testing a flame. "And if he cannot control it?" I asked. "Then we shall see him only at the instant of his destruction." We reached the mouth of Long Acre, where the street opened onto wider traffic. A hansom stood idling there, its driver dozing. Holmes examined the stones beneath the gas lamp and found a faint glimmer of powder. He passed this way. Toward the river, perhaps the damp air would aid his diffusion. Before I could reply, a sudden gust extinguished the lamp entirely, plunging the street into darkness. A voice, low and distorted, came from somewhere behind us. "You should not have followed." Holmes spun. "Vale!" the voice replied, calm but hollow. "You misunderstand, Mr. Holmes. I follow you." The air thickened with that metallic scent. My throat burned. Holmes drew a match and struck it. The flare illuminated nothing but swirling mist, and yet, within that flame's brief life, I saw the impression of eyes staring directly at us, eyes without face or contour. The match went out. Silence returned, broken only by the faint dripping of water from the eaves. Holmes's tone, when he spoke, was almost gentle. "Watson, remember this moment. It may prove that we confront not murder, but metamorphosis." He turned, gestured briskly toward the waiting cab. "Back to Baker Street. There is a method to test our hypothesis, but it must be done before dawn. Bring with you the wallpaper and the vial." As we climbed into the cab, the horse shied suddenly, ears pricked. The driver swore and struck the reins, and as we jolted forward, I looked back at the gas lamp relit itself in a tremor of light, and for an instant, across the paving stones, I thought I saw a human silhouette reforming in its glow. Then it vanished, leaving only the echo of dripping water, steady, deliberate, like the ticking of a watch counting down to revelation. The cab rattled toward Baker Street through a blur of half-lit streets, the smell of damp stone and horses blending with that faint, lingering trace of sulphur. Holmes sat rigid, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes fixed on the shifting light through the small window. The rhythmic clatter of wheels served as the same relentless pulse that had followed us since the night, began a mechanical echo of time itself, counting our steps into strangeness. "He follows us, Watson," Holmes said softly. "Not in pursuit, but proximity. I felt the air stir when you closed the cab door. He is learning the limits of his own condition. You think Vale is invisible, then not merely without shadow?" Holmes's mouth curved faintly. "There is no merely in the absence of shadow, my dear fellow. A man deprived of it stands already half beyond nature's rules." He leaned forward. "Do you recall the residue on the floor of Mortlake's room? If my surmise is correct, that was no accident of spillage. It was the byproduct of transmutation, an organic reaction between light and living tissue. Vale may be not merely afflicted, but altered. The wheels struck a hollow patch of pavement. I glanced at the window and caught my reflection faintly superimposed on Holmes's, yet even in that ghostly mirror I thought absurdly that a third face flickered between ours, too pale and featureless to endure a second look. When we arrived, Holmes wasted no movement. "Mrs. Hudson must not be disturbed," he said curtly. "We shall work in darkness." Inside the sitting room he shut the blinds, leaving only the dim glow of the fireplace to quiver along the bookshelves. The ticking of the mantel clock filled the silence with precise menace. Holmes placed the wallpaper fragment, the vial of oblivion, and a small crystal prism upon the table. "I will show you," he murmured, "how the eye may deceive the soul." He struck a match, held it above the wallpaper, and let a single drop from the vial fall into the flame. A sharp hiss, a flash of violet light, and in that instant the wallpaper's faint grey outline shimmered as though alive. I recoiled instinctively. "Good heavens, Holmes!" He extinguished the match, eyes gleaming. The chemical reacts to heat and light together. Mortlake's experiment was meant to trap illumination within scent, to imprison visibility itself. The result, as we see, is catastrophic. When exposed in excess, it annihilates contrast. A man doused in such a compound would cease to cast a shadow, for his surface would repel all definition. Continue the process, and he might dissolve entirely from the visible spectrum. I stared at the darkening patch where the residue still smoked faintly. Then Vale's condition is not curse or trick, it is the result of exposure. Precisely. And consider the moral irony. The man who sought to make his perfume eternal has made himself ephemeral. Holmes turned sharply toward the window. "But the presence we felt, Watson, cannot be explained by chemistry alone. There is will behind it." The floor creaked. I started, but Holmes raised his hand in silence. The faint ticking of the clock seemed to falter, then resume, as if time itself had hesitated. "Do you perceive the drought?" Holmes whispered. "Someone stands near the door." Before I could move, the gas lamp sputtered out with a soft sigh, plunging us into absolute blackness. Then unmistakable the sound of a cane touching the floorboards, 3 deliberate taps, the same cadence that had heralded Vale's arrival. Holmes spoke into the dark, voice calm. "Mr. Vale, you honour us. Pray step closer. I assure you, light is no longer your enemy." A whisper of air passed my cheek. The odour of lavender mingled with iron. My hand tightened on my revolver, though I could see nothing. "Holmes!" came a voice, hollow, blurred, as though spoken through mist. "You meddle in what was never meant for reason." "I meddle," Holmes answered evenly. "For whatever reason, you have transformed yourself into an idea. Mr. Vale, and ideas, unlike men, leave no fingerprints. Tell me, did Mortlake share your fate willingly?" A low breath, almost a sigh. He envied me. He sought the same release to slip beyond reflection, beyond judgment. But the light took him instead. Holmes moved slightly, the scrape of his chair soft against the floor. Then his silhouette on the wall was no death but transformation, gone awry. "You speak as though he still breathes. Perhaps he does it as a pattern, as persistence. Every experiment leaves residue. Even oblivion must cling to something." The room trembled faintly as though the air thickened. The clock ticked on, stubborn, defiant. I thought I heard faint steps circling us, sound without source, movement without mass. Holmes's tone sharpened. "You are not lost entirely, Vale. The substance upon your skin still obeys the properties of light. Allow me to reverse them." He struck a match. The flame flared violently, illuminating for a heartbeat the outline of a man, tall, pale, half-transparent, eyes burning like distant lanterns. Then the flame died, leaving an after-image seared upon the mind. A voice gasped, not Vale's, but Holmes's own. Watson opened the blinds. "Quickly!" I tore them aside. Pale dawnlight seeped in, weak but persistent. The room filled with its ashen glow, and in that uncertain light we saw the impossible. Against the opposite wall, another shape had formed beside the fireplace, smaller, distorted, yet unmistakably human. Holmes approached it, breath short. "Mortlake," he murmured. "He is here, or what remains of him." The outline shimmered faintly, then stilled. I thought I detected the faintest scent of violets once more, like a sigh released from the wall itself. Holmes turned, eyes alight with grim revelation. "Watson, note the proximity Vale's presence and this apparition coincide. It may be that the bond between them persists through the very compound they devised. If one is near light, the other becomes visible by reflection." He moved rapidly to the desk, seized a glass tube, and began measuring drops of the oblivion solution. "I shall attempt to recreate the reaction under controlled conditions. If we can stabilize it, we may recover the missing man. But Holmes, what if the reverse occurs?" He gave that quick, rare smile of perilous confidence. "Then you will witness my own disappearance, my dear fellow. Keep your revolver trained upon the sound should I fade." He raised the tube toward the dawnlight. The liquid within shimmered, silver-grey, and the faint ticking of the clock seemed to sync to the movement of the fluid. Then came a soft sound like distant laughter, followed by the unmistakable tap of a cane from somewhere within the very walls. The sound came again, 3 hollow taps from within the wall itself, and Holmes froze mid-gesture, the tube of shimmering liquid trembling in his hand. The air in the room seemed to contract, every molecule drawn toward that invisible rhythm. I could hear my own heartbeat matching it, the ticking of the mantel clock merging with the cane's deliberate pulse until the two were indistinguishable. "Hold the window light steady, Watson," Holmes said quietly. "He's here." I obeyed, one hand on the blind cord, while the other hovered near my revolver. Holmes stepped nearer the fireplace. The pale outline on the wallpaper brightened, as though reacting to the weak sunlight that now streamed across the rug. "Observe," Holmes murmured. "The energy is phototropic. It seeks illumination. Mortlake's essence remains bound to the light that destroyed him. When Vale approaches, the resonance awakens. The two are opposite ends of one experiment man and shadow reversed." I felt a shiver that was not entirely from fear. Then Mortlake's death. At his partner's birth, Holmes interrupted. In separating shadow from substance, they divided being itself. He lowered the tube, allowing a single drop of the silver liquid to fall upon the corner of the wallpaper. Instantly, the faint shape quivered the curve of a shoulder, the suggestion of a face. A whisper seemed to pass through the room. Alton Holmes's head snapped up. "Did you hear it?" "I did." "Good. Then he is conscious. The transformation is incomplete. Mortlake exists in a state of luminous suspension dependent upon Vale's proximity. Their bond is parasitic and each sustains the other's visibility." The outline pulsed once, then dimmed, and at that same instant the faint scent of violets and metal returned, stronger than before. "He draws nearer," Holmes said. "Do not move." From the far corner of the room came the soft scrape of a shoe on wood. The air shimmered faintly and a voice emerged, clearer than we had ever heard it. "You cannot reverse what has been perfected, Mr. Holmes. Mortlake's release was his triumph." Holmes's tone sharpened. "A triumph that left a corpse upon a wall?" "Your vanity exceeds your intellect, Mr. Vale. You sought transcendence but achieved dependency, your existence tethered to the man you destroyed." "Destroyed?" the voice replied, almost tenderly. "He begged for it. He wanted to escape the burden of the visible. He envied my peace." Holmes moved closer to the sound. "Then why follow me through London if peace was your goal?" Silence, then the faintest ripple of laughter. Because you too are a man trapped by sight. You observe until nothing human remains. You live for exposure. Holmes's jaw tightened. Perhaps. But unlike you, I do not mistake invisibility for absolution. As if in answer, the light in the room dimmed. The flame in the fireplace bent sideways, as though drawn toward the invisible figure. Holmes thrust the tube into my hand. Keep it steady. When I signal, drop another measure upon the wall. He moved to the center of the room, speaking deliberately, his words cutting through the growing shadow. Vale, your condition can be counteracted. The reaction that renders you unseen can be reversed by light filtered through silver. Step forward, and I will prove it. The air stirred. I caught again that faint metallic ring of a cane touching the floor. Prove it, Vale said. Holmes raised his hand. Now, Watson! I released a second drop onto the wall. The effect was immediate. The grey silhouette flared bright as molten glass, and beside it, for one electric instant, the figure of Alton Vale appeared tall, spectral, his features caught between substance and glow. His eyes met Holmes's across the firelight, burning with comprehension and terror. No, he cried, raising an arm that dissolved even as he moved. The sound of the cane fell to the floor, clattering once, before vanishing altogether. The brightness on the wall pulsed violently, then contracted to a point and faded. When my vision cleared, both figures were gone. The wallpaper was whole again, the room empty but for the stench of singed air. Holmes stood motionless, then exhaled slowly. We forced the reaction's climax, he said at last. The bond has broken. I stared in disbelief. Then Vale, reduced to the same condition as Mortlake, neither man nor light, but memory. They are one now, unified in oblivion. He walked to the window and looked out at the paling sky. We have ended a phenomenon and, I fear, extinguished two souls. For a long moment only the clock ticked. Then Holmes turned back to the table, studying the small residue of silver fluid at the bottom of the vial. There is irony here, Watson. They sought to remove the shadow and in doing so erased themselves. Humanity lives by contrast without darkness. Form has no meaning. He replaced the stopper with care. Still, I doubt we have seen the last of their work. The laws of light do not forget so easily. As he spoke, the clock emitted a faint, irregular beat, tick-tick, pause-tick, as though echoing the lost rhythm of Vale's cane. Holmes looked toward it sharply. The echo persists, he murmured. Perhaps only sound remembers what sight cannot. I watched him cross to the fireplace, where a small scorch mark had appeared upon the stone the size of a man's palm, faintly luminous in the dim air. He regarded it without speaking. "Holmes," I said softly, "will it fade?" He did not answer at once. Then in a voice quiet as breath, "No. Some shadows, Watson, are cast by the absence of those who made them." A gust from the chimney stirred the ashes, sending up a hiss like whispering laughter. The clock ticked once more, steady and patient, as if the night itself were listening. Holmes remained before the hearth, the faintly glowing mark reflected in his eyes like a private constellation. The hiss from the chimney subsided to silence, and the ticking clock recovered its even pulse, though softer now, as if reluctant to intrude. I felt that no sound in that room was accidental. Every echo, every breath belonged to the logic of what we had just witnessed. "Holmes," I ventured, "if the reaction is finished, what remains to fear?" He turned slightly. "Fear, my dear Watson, is never the province of chemistry. It belongs to consequence. We have disrupted an equilibrium whose limits we do not understand. When one tampers with the spectrum of visibility, one tampers with the mind's sense of proof." He gestured toward the scorch on the stone. You see that faint glimmer. It should fade with cooling, yet it persists. That is no trick of heat. It is the persistence of energy, the visual memory of an unfinished act. The sound of the clock grew louder again, its mechanism clicking in hesitant irregularity. Holmes's gaze followed it. Mortlake's formula was not designed for permanence, but for recurrence. Vale's disappearance may not be his end. It may be his interval. I could not restrain myself. You mean he might reappear? Holmes smiled faintly. I mean that nature seldom closes an experiment until it has exhausted every variable. What we destroyed tonight was merely phase 1 of the reaction. He crossed to the desk, opening his casebook with brisk precision. And phase 2, I suspect, will not wait long. He dipped his pen, scribbling rapid notes. Let us record the constants, the silver compound, the lavender essence, and the role of light as activator. But there is one element that unmeasured the human factor. I watched him write, the scratch of the pen blending with the rhythmic ticking. You believe Vale's will could revive the process? Not will alone, Holmes replied. Consciousness. His mind, saturated with the compound, may yet generate reaction through memory. He believed himself free of reflection, and belief, Watson, is the most potent catalyst known to man. He paused, listening. From somewhere beyond the window came the faint patter of rain beginning to fall, the first we had heard since dusk. Holmes's expression altered subtly. Do you hear that? Each drop upon the sill carries trace metallic resonance. The city itself answers him. I strained to listen, and indeed the rhythm of the rain mingled with the clock in a strange syncopation, irregular yet purposeful. Holmes stepped to the window, threw it open, and leaned into the damp air. The street below was empty, save for the flicker of gaslight upon puddles. Yet even through the noise of rain, I fancied I heard it again, tap, 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 that same unmistakable canon stroke, patient as thought. He adapts to sound now, Holmes said. The absence of light forces him to exist through vibration. We have forced Vale from the visual to the auditory plane. The implication chilled me. Then he lives within sound itself? Temporarily, yes. Mortlake's formula has stripped him of light, but granted him resonance. The human mind cannot endure silence, therefore he seeks rhythm to preserve coherence. It is the last refuge of self. As if to confirm the theory, the rain shifted, beating in precise intervals against the glass. 3 slow strokes, pause, then 3 again. Holmes watched it intently. Remarkable, he murmured. He communicates through weather. The man without shadow has become the echo of his own existence. The idea was so unearthly I could not speak. Holmes turned to me suddenly. Watson, fetch the tuning fork from my violin case. I obeyed. He struck it gently upon the mantel. The tone, pure, high, trembling, filled the air. At once the clock faltered, the rain against the window ceased its pattern as if listening. Holmes tilted his head, his expression bright with fierce curiosity. There. He responds to frequency. You may yet converse with him. I swallowed. Then for God's sake, Holmes, what should we ask? He met my eyes. Not what, Watson, where. If he is distributed within vibration, he must choose a locus of resonance. Sound leaves a trail as surely as a footprint. He struck the fork again, this time lower. The tone deepened. In its wake came a faint reply. 3 dull taps from the chimney breast, then 1 softer tap from the clock itself. Holmes smiled grimly. 2 anchors are the fire and the timepiece. His essence binds to both. The air trembled faintly, the faint scent of violet returned, twisting through the smoke. I thought I heard a sigh that was not wind. Holmes, it whispered, though I could not tell whether from the wall or air. He inclined his head, perfectly calm. Mr. Vale, you have survived dissolution at cost. You exist only where rhythm persists. The silence of death rejects you, does it not? The whisper came again, faint, broken. Mortlake waits. Where? Holmes demanded. In reflection? In memory? Below light, the voice faded, leaving behind only the persistent beat of the rain. Holmes turned swiftly toward me. Watson, the Thames! The chemical reaction requires darkness and moisture. If Mortlake's formula continues to expand, the river will mirror it quite literally. We must go at once. I hesitated. At this hour, at any hour when shadow moves of its own accord, he said briskly, seizing his coat. Bring the vial and the tuning fork. The rain provides the perfect conductor. As we descended, the stairwell echoed with the same syncopated rhythm that had haunted us since the first knock at the door tap. Pause. Tap. Holmes moved fast, his cane striking in perfect counterbeat, as though answering Vale in conversation. Outside, the gas lamps hissed under the rain. The air smelled of metal and violets again, heavier now, almost tangible. I felt a strange vibration in the paving stones underfoot, faint, steady, alive. Holmes paused at the edge of the curb, listening. "He's ahead of us," he murmured. "Do you hear it?" The sound came low and resonated the toll of Big Ben across the rain, each note trembling through the soaked air. Between the strokes, I could just discern another rhythm, closer, quieter, the echo of the cane, keeping perfect time with the bell. Holmes adjusted his hat, his face lit by the lamplight's wan shimmer. Our quarry, Watson, has chosen the river's reflection as his next experiment. Tonight, we hunt a man who walks in sound and whose shadow waits beneath the water. The rain quickened, drowning all but the pulse of footsteps vanishing toward the embankment. We hurried through the soaked labyrinth of streets toward the embankment, the sound of our own footsteps melding with the rain's uneven percussion. The gas lamps flickered against the wet stone, their reflections trembling in every puddle, unstable, luminous twins of the light above. Holmes moved quickly, his head slightly bent, his coat drawn close about him. I followed, clutching the vial and tuning fork in my pocket, as though they were instruments of fate. "Keep your ears open," he said. "Sight deceives us now. It is the rhythm that will betray him." The rain beat harder, the pavement slick beneath our boots. We reached the river wall where the Thames moved like a black artery beneath the bridge. Its surface was restless, broken by circles of falling rain that pulsed outward, each collision a low, resonant note against the deeper hum of the city. Holmes halted near the parapet and raised his hand. "Listen," he whispered. Amid the hiss of rain, there came a slower, deliberate pattern. 3 taps on metal, then silence, then 3 again. It echoed through the damp air, distant yet unmistakable. "He's here," Holmes said, "not above us, below." I leaned over the railing. Beneath the bridge, half shielded by shadow, something glimmered in the water, faint, silvery, rhythmic, as though a submerged lantern were blinking at timed intervals. Holmes's eyes narrowed. The reaction continues. He has found his mirror. We descended the slick steps to the lower walkway. The smell of the river silt, oil and rain mingled with that same chemical sweetness of lavender and iron. Holmes crouched near the waterline, drew the tuning fork from his pocket, and struck it lightly against the parapet. The clear note carried through the mist. For several seconds nothing stirred. Then, from beneath the water came a reply. 3 dull vibrations rising through the stones beneath our feet. Holmes's voice was low. "Do you perceive it, Watson?" He answers in resonance. He no longer inhabits form but reflection. "It's unholy," I muttered. A man dissolved into echo and image. "Not unholy," Holmes corrected, "merely premature." He touched what humanity was not prepared to touch: identity without substance. He glanced toward the river's shifting light. but even echo leaves a trace. Observe that shimmer beneath the arch. That is not water's reflection, it's phosphorescence. I followed his gaze. The glow pulsed rhythmically, expanding and contracting like a living thing. "It moves!" I exclaimed. Holmes nodded. "And moves with purpose. The compound is self-reactive, seeking equilibrium. Vale has become its nucleus. If the reaction spreads through the river, London will glow like a lantern before morning. What must we do?" He rose, rain running from his hat brim. "Neutralize it. Silver opposes silver, a paradox he himself devised. Give me the vial." I handed it over, my fingers trembling. Holmes uncorked it and let several drops fall into the river. The effect was immediate. The shimmering light contracted, swirling inward. A faint moan, neither wind nor human, rose from beneath the bridge. "Careful!" I cried. Holmes stood firm. "Do you hear that tone, Watson? It's harmonic interference. The two silver compounds are colliding, annihilating each other. The river seemed to convulse. The glow flared, then dimmed. From its heart, something dark and shapeless rose momentarily, a human outline, dissolving even as it surfaced. The rain lashed it, scattering its form into vapor. Holmes spoke softly, almost with pity. "He is undoing himself." The sound motif returned, the triple tap of the cane, faint but insistent, echoing from beneath the arches. "He resists dissolution," Holmes murmured. "Even now he clings to identity." "Watson, strike the tuning fork quickly." I obeyed. The tone cut through the storm, and the echo of the cane faltered, weakening. Holmes dropped to one knee and plunged his hand into the water, drawing it out, gloved and silvered with residue. "Enough," he said. The reaction reverses. The river reclaims its silence. The phosphorescent light sank and vanished. Only the rain remained, pattering steadily, like 1,000 quiet clocks. Holmes rose and regarded his hand under the dim lamp. "Observe, Watson, the residue adheres only where warmth persists. The reaction is thermal life itself as its conductor." I stared at the faint silver sheen on his glove. "Then you?" He gave a short, ironic smile. "An occupational hazard. But fear not, I shall not vanish before supper." The levity did not mask his weariness. His face, drawn and pallid under the rain, betrayed the strain of mental exertion. "We have witnessed a form of existence nature did not intend," he said quietly. "Vale's ambition was spiritual vanity masquerading as science. He wished to live without consequence, to see without being seen. But all perception demands reflection. Without shadow, there is no self." He turned toward the river again, gazing into the black water. Still, I cannot help but admire the precision. To dissolve one's body into light, to survive as vibration, it is genius turned inward upon itself. A faint noise interrupted him, a drip, slow and measured, from the parapet above. The water struck the stone beside his boot in the same triple rhythm, tap, tap, tap. Holmes's expression darkened. "He persists," he said softly. "Sound does not die in water, it bends." Before I could answer, the river stirred once more. A small object broke the surface of a silver-handled cane, its tip striking stone thrice before falling still. It drifted toward us, carried by the current until it caught against the steps. Holmes bent, retrieved it, and examined the handle under the lamp. The engraved initials AV gleamed faintly, haloed by the rain. "Proof of matter," he said. "Every transformation leaves residue. Even the unseen leaves something to hold." He set the cane carefully upon the parapet. "And yet the sound remains. Do you hear it?" Indeed, the faint ticking persisted, indistinguishable now from the rain patient, deliberate, eternal. Holmes looked at me, his eyes reflecting the dull glow of the river. "We are not done, Watson. The experiment continues wherever sound touches silence." And if my hypothesis is correct, we shall find its next echo not in water, but in glass. The chime of a distant bell drifted across the embankment, slow and resonant, like the opening note of an unseen symphony. The bell's fading chime lingered above the river like a tremor suspended in air. Holmes's gaze followed it until the final note dissolved into the rain, leaving behind that same uncanny rhythm, 3 slow taps, pause, then 3 again, now softer, as though confined within the very droplets that struck the parapet. "Glass," he murmured. He spoke to me through water, but now seeks reflection in transparency. Mortlake's apartment contained laboratory glassware, a perfect conductor of vibration and light. The next phase continues not beneath the bridge, Watson, but above it, in the city that gleams by gas and windows. We turned from the river, the rain easing to mist. The streets gleamed like dark mirrors, every puddle doubling the lamps above. Holmes carried Vale's cane beneath his arm as though it were evidence or relic. The rhythmic click of his boots against the wet stones replaced the vanished tapping, yet each step seemed answered faintly by its own echo from nowhere visible. "Do you suppose he still moves among us?" I asked. "I suppose," Holmes replied. "That reflection itself has become his chamber. When light is broken by rain, each droplet becomes a lens. Tonight, London is a million eyes, and he peers from all of them." The thought chilled me more than the wind. We crossed Charing Cross, where the great windows of shop fronts glittered in the gaslight. For a moment I thought I saw Vale's pale visage glimmer faintly upon the glass of a jeweller's case before dissolving back into the shine. Holmes noticed my start. "You saw it too?" Yes. "His likeness, just for a second, then he grows bolder," Holmes said. "He's attempting to stabilize his reflection. The compound's energy, though dispersed, seeks coherence through symmetry. Every pane of glass acts as a magnet to his identity." He quickened his pace. "We must return to Mortlake's rooms before dawn. The experiment's residue will have sought its origin, as all reactions do." The rain had stopped by the time we reached Hartnell Street again. The constable who had once guarded the door was gone, leaving the entrance unlit and silent. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of chemicals and damp paper. Holmes set the cane upon the desk, then turned down the lamp's flame until only a thin glow remained. "Watch the mirror above the mantel," he instructed. "Do not move, whatever you see." The clock ticked slow, precise, a heartbeat of the room. As I stared, the surface of the mirror began to cloud, the silver backing flickering with faint inner light. Then gradually a face emerged, drawn, translucent, eyes wide with strain. Holmes spoke softly. "Mr. Vale, you persist beyond dissolution. Why return here?" The reflection moved its lips, yet no sound reached us. Only the faint vibration of the lamp's glass chimney carried its answer, a tremor we could feel but not hear. Holmes touched the tuning fork to the table, struck it, and held it near the mirror. The resonance spread through the room papers, fluttering the flame, quivering. A whisper emerged, faint as breath upon a window. "He is not gone. Mortlake lives in the glass. He calls me back." Holmes's expression sharpened. Then the polarity reverses. Mortlake's consciousness survived within reflection, and now pulls Vale toward reunion. The experiment consumes them both. The image in the mirror rippled, then fractured into 2 overlapping shapes, one sharp, the other dim faces merging and dividing in slow distortion. I felt a surge of dread. "Holmes, it's changing." "Precisely. The boundary between reflection and observer collapses. If that pane shatters, we may inherit their condition." He moved quickly, extinguished the lamp, and drew the curtain across the mirror. The instant darkness fell, a loud crack split the air. The glass behind the curtain fractured in a perfect radial pattern, like frost blooming across a window. Holmes tore down the cloth. The mirror was intact but crazed with veins of silver light, each crack pulsating faintly. Within those veins the same rhythm tap-tap-tap-tapped echoed from nowhere and everywhere. "Do you hear it?" he said tensely. The cane's rhythm now translated into vibration through glass. "He is not confined to one medium. He has become oscillating." "What can stop it?" I cried. Holmes's gaze darted to the shelves where Mortlake's instruments rested. "Interference. Sound can destroy its own echo." He seized a thin metal rod, struck it against the hearth, and produced a clear, piercing tone. The mirror shivered violently, its rhythmic tapping faltering. But then another tone rose deeper, resonant, issuing not from the rod, but from the cane upon the table. It vibrated where it lay, striking its handle softly against the wood, in counterpoint to Holmes's note. "Vale answers," Holmes muttered. "He defends his new domain." He lowered the rod. The opposing sounds ceased. Only the ticking clock remained relentless, neutral. Holmes drew a long breath. He has linked himself to Mortlake's last instrument, glass. The fracture pattern indicates containment. We must not break it, we must freeze it. How? By stillness, he said. Movement feeds resonance. We do nothing. We stood motionless. The minutes passed, each tick of the clock weighing upon the silence. Gradually the silver veins dimmed, their glow retreating into the dark until only one faint point of light remained near the mirror's center. It pulsed once, twice, then faded entirely. Holmes let out a slow exhale. There. The interference collapses. He will linger only where light and echo overlap in the junction of vision and sound. You mean that he endures wherever a mirror trembles or a voice breaks upon glass? He turned to the desk, his voice low but steady. "Watson, writing this for the record, Alton Vale and Edwin Mortlake achieved the dissolution of form through resonance between scent, silver, and sound. In the attempt to escape reflection, they became it. The words hung in the dim air. The rain began again outside, gentle and persistent, its rhythm matching the clock's patient beat. Holmes looked up, expression unreadable. And yet, Watson, if we have silenced him, why does the clock still echo that same threefold rhythm? We both turned toward the mantelpiece. The clock's pendulum swung in perfect sequence, tap, 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 though I had never before heard it sound so hollow, so human. Holmes leaned close to the mantel, his eyes fixed on the pendulum's slow, deliberate swing. "It should not move so," he said quietly. "The mainspring is wound, yet I feel no tension. Something external sustains its rhythm." The sound tap, tap, tap seemed to vibrate through the very air, faint yet insistent, as though each stroke were being echoed inside our bones. Holmes reached out and steadied the clock with one gloved hand. The pendulum halted, but the tapping continued now without source, a ghostly percussion inhabiting the silence it should have broken. I could not disguise my unease. Then he lives still within sound. Holmes's lips curved into that rare expression of admiration mixed with dread. Lives, perhaps endure. He has achieved what few philosophers dared, the persistence of consciousness through frequency. The clock's metal acts as a resonator, and our room, Watson, is his cathedral. He stepped back, listening with scientific attention rather than fear. "You note the triple cadence? It mirrors the same temporal rhythm of Mortlake's formula, the balance of vibration, illumination, and scent. He repeats the pattern compulsively, as if reminding himself he exists." I whispered, "Can he harm us?" Holmes's gaze drifted toward the darkened mirror. "Only if we answer. Reflection requires participation." At that instant the sound deepened, filling the room with a low hum. The mirror's fractured surface trembled, each silver vein glinting like a heartbeat. From the cane on the table came a faint metallic ring, harmonizing with the invisible rhythm. Holmes turned sharply. "Observe, Watson. The vibration travels through conductors of memory, the objects that bore witness to his last moments. Cane, clock, glass, all sympathetic instruments in one orchestral resonance." He assembles himself again, not in form, but in pattern. The hum grew louder, the air quivering. I felt the hairs rise on my arm. Holmes raised a finger for silence, his eyes darting between the mirror and the clock. He's testing thresholds, determining how far consciousness may project without cohesion. Note the oscillation frequency slightly slower than heartbeat. He aligns himself with the body's own rhythm. The realization struck me. Then he could inhabit anyone who matches that rhythm. Holmes gave a single nod. "In theory. It is not possession, Watson, it is resonance. He needs only a host's pulse to amplify his own." A chill passed through me as I felt my own heartbeat matching the room's vibration. The mirror pulsed in time, each crack flashing briefly with dull light. "Holmes," I gasped, "he's aligning with us." Holmes acted instantly. "Step back. Fix your gaze upon the floor to avoid reflection." He seized a small bottle from the table and flung its contents against the wall. The air filled with the acrid scent of ammonia, cutting through the sweetness of lavender. The light from the cracks dimmed at once, as though smothered. "Good," he murmured. "The volatile compound disrupts molecular cohesion. He cannot sustain himself in chemical turbulence." I exhaled in relief, but the victory was brief. The pendulum, though still, began to tick again of its own accord, faint, erratic, desperate. Then from the far corner near the window came the whisper of glass sliding against wood. We turned to see the pane quiver as if struck by a soft breath. Holmes's tone hardened. He moves toward the window as a final conduit. The glass offers reflection infinite, multiplied by the city's lamps. What can stop him? "Containment," Holmes said quickly. "If he reaches open air, he will disperse beyond recovery. We must reverse the polarity before he crosses the threshold." He seized the tuning fork, struck it sharply, and pressed its vibrating tip against the mirror's cracked surface. The tone that followed was almost unbearable, a shrill, piercing note that set every surface trembling. The air brightened, the window pane shuddered violently. Through the chaos, I thought I saw the faint outline of a man's face appear upon the glass, not one, but two overlapping visages, Vale and Mortlake, fused in their struggle to exist. Holmes shouted above the din, "He fights himself! The twin consciousnesses seek dominance. One must yield, or both will vanish." The reflection twisted, each face melting into the other. A strangled cry filled the room, neither voice nor echo, but something between. Then suddenly the sound motif fractured the tap, tap-tap breaking into chaotic percussion, as though time itself convulsed. Holmes dropped the tuning fork and seized the cane. "Stand back!" He brought the handle down upon the hearthstone with a sharp crack. Instantly the vibration ceased. The mirror fell silent. The clock stopped dead. Even the air seemed to pause in disbelief. For a long moment there was nothing, only the faint hiss of the cooling lamp and the distant drip of rain beyond the window. Then Holmes spoke, his voice measured. "We have inverted the polarity. The energy collapses inward." He lifted the cane. Its handle, once silver, now gleamed black as obsidian. Within it, faint motes of light swirled, fragments of reflection, caught and stilled. Holmes held it delicately. "A prison, Watson. They are contained within the resonance they created. The world will hear them only as faint, irregular ticking in clocks, in glass, in the whisper of a cane upon stone. But they are harmless now." I stared at the object, both awed and unnerved. "And if it breaks?" "Then London shall gleam again," he said, quietly, "and every mirror will remember its maker." He placed the cane gently upon the desk, its tip striking the wood, once a single, final tap. We stood listening. Nothing followed. The silence felt vast, weightless, almost sacred. At last Holmes turned toward me with that brief, weary smile I had seen after only the most harrowing victories. "You perceive, Watson, the paradox that a man who sought to escape reflection has become its eternal echo. Mortlake and Vale will converse forever in silence." He looked once more toward the dead clock, then to the faint glow upon the cane's handle. "Come. The dawn approaches, and I prefer my coffee without the accompaniment of metaphysics." As we left the room, the boards creaked beneath our steps twice, then once more a small accidental rhythm that made Holmes glance back. "Listen carefully," he said. "Do you hear it?" A soft echo answered from the darkened room, tap, tap, tap. Faint but unmistakable. Holmes's words hung in the air, that ghostly tap, 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 answering from behind us like the echo of a pulse we had disturbed but not stilled. For an instant neither of us breathed. Then Holmes, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the door, said softly, "Even silence remembers its maker. Come, Watson, we must test whether memory obeys command." He stepped back into the sitting room, and I followed. The lamp flame trembled, as though uncertain whether to burn or to listen. The cane lay upon the desk, its obsidian handle faintly aglow with an inward shimmer. The faint metallic ticking persisted, steady and patient. Holmes approached it carefully. "You see, Watson, the sound no longer travels through air. It vibrates internally, a residual resonance of the trapped energy. Observe." He placed a fingertip lightly against the handle. The ticking ceased instantly, as though touched by authority. When he removed his hand, the rhythm resumed, softer, like a sigh of obedience. "Incredible," I murmured. "Then it lives within the object." "Not lives," he corrected, "but endures. A fragment of consciousness imprinted by repetition. Thought becomes rhythm, rhythm becomes persistence, and persistence, Watson, is the closest thing to immortality." The remark struck me with sudden melancholy. "And you, Holmes? Would you wish for such endurance?" He regarded me sidelong. "I prefer impermanence. It leaves fewer echoes for others to tidy." His tone was wry, but his eyes did not share the humour. He turned back to the cane, studying the play of light across its surface. "Do you recall my earlier deduction that Vale's transformation might have required emotional impetus? Vanity was his motive, but remorse may have been the final catalyst. Mortlake's envy, Vale's pride, two chords struck in perfect dissonance. Their experiment succeeded not by precision, but by tragedy. The rhythmic beat altered suddenly faster, uneven, as though stirred by emotion. Holmes's brow furrowed. "You see? Mention of their names agitates the resonance. We have become participants in their afterthought." I shivered. "Then let us not speak of them further." He nodded, but his gaze remained intent. "One final verification," he murmured, and lifted the tuning fork once more. He struck it gently, holding the tone near the cane. The rhythmic tapping ceased altogether. For a heartbeat, the silence was total, and in that silence a faint whisper seemed to emerge from nowhere. "Holmes," I started. "Did you hear?" He raised a hand. "Yes." His expression hardened into scientific focus. "Speech without body, Watson. The final residue of the pattern is converted to wave. Do you note the irony? They sought to transcend matter and have achieved it as sound, eternally trapped within stillness." The whisper came again, faint but clear. "Set free." Holmes's voice dropped to a whisper of its own. "They plead for dissolution." "But how?" I asked. "If they exist only as vibration, then silence is their death," he said. He lowered the fork until its tone died completely. The air quivered once, then steadied. The ticking ended. No echo followed. The room felt emptier than before, as if we had just exhaled two ghosts. Holmes set the fork aside with reverence. There. Their echo has resolved into stillness. The paradox of visibility ends not with darkness, but with quiet. He crossed to the window, drawing back the curtain. Dawn had broken faintly over London, a grey wash across the rooftops. The rain had ceased, and the city gleamed with that fragile cleanliness that follows night storms. "Watson," he said, "we have pursued men who dared erase the line between presence and perception. Yet what is an investigation but the same act in another form? To observe is to disturb." I smiled faintly. "Then we are all, in some measure, guilty of resonance." He glanced at me with that quick warmth that sometimes betrayed itself before retreating again. "Perhaps so, but let us at least choose our echoes wisely." We stood a while in silence, the morning light touching the cane on the table. It no longer glowed. It was simply a stick of dark wood, innocent of sound or memory. At last Holmes spoke again. "You realize, Watson, that we have not disproved immortality, merely confined it. The human mind leaves traces as surely as scent or reflection. What Vale and Mortlake attempted through science, others achieve through remorse, or love, or fear." He smiled, faint but genuine. "If ever I am gone, listen carefully in this room. Should the clock strike 3 times without cause, you may conclude that my curiosity has survived the grave." "You would make a ghost of yourself for experiment's sake," I said. "For confirmation's sake," he replied dryly. "I never speculate without data, even about eternity." He reached to wind the clock, the first true sound in many minutes. The mechanism responded with a faint click, and for the first time since the night began, its rhythm was natural again. Tick-tock, tick-tock, no triple cadence, no echo, only time restored to itself. Holmes poured coffee from the pot Mrs. Hudson must have left before retiring. The aroma filled the room, earthly and reassuring. "There, Watson," he said, handing me a cup, "the only perfume I require." I accepted it gratefully. The warmth steadied me. "Do you suppose anyone will believe what occurred tonight?" "Belief is a matter of convenience," Holmes said. "I shall describe it in my notes as an optical resonance experiment concluded by spontaneous cessation of vibration. You may, if you wish, omit the ghosts." I laughed softly. "And what of Vale and Mortlake?" He regarded the fading dawn. "They will linger only as metaphor. 2 men who tried to live without shadow, and in so doing became the darkness they feared." The cane rested quietly upon the desk. As I looked at it, the faintest creak from the settling floorboards broke the hush, 3 gentle intervals, spaced like a remembered heartbeat. Holmes smiled without turning. "Ah, even silence keeps time, Watson. The case is closed." The pendulum swung once, caught the first ray of sunlight, and was still. The pendulum's stillness lingered like a held breath. Holmes stood beside it, gazing through the thin veil of sunlight that now touched the desk, the faintest steam rising from his untouched coffee. I thought of all we had seen in those past hours. A man without a shadow, a wall that remembered, a river that glowed and felt the uncanny quiet settle upon me like snowfall after thunder. Holmes broke it first. "Watson," he said, "I find it oddly consoling that even in their dissolution, Vale and Mortlake left a pattern. It proves that nature abhors annihilation. She will not erase even a mistake. She merely rearranges it into law." I smiled faintly. "You speak as though mercy were hidden in chemistry." "Perhaps it is," he replied. "What we call mercy may only be the universe's reluctance to waste its own energy. Every thought, every sound persists somewhere, even if only as vibration, in another element. Oblivion, therefore, is only redistribution." He looked toward the cane, now inert. They wished to abolish consequence to exist without being seen, but to remove one's shadow is to deny one's boundary, and without boundary there is no self. His words stirred me. Then the moral, if there is one, lies not in the science but in the vanity. Holmes nodded. Precisely. They mistook concealment for freedom. Yet man's dignity resides in limitation, in being visible enough to be held to account. It is our shadows that prove we belong to the light. The notion hung between us. Outside, the city's murmur was awakening distant hoofbeats, a carriage wheel over puddles, the faint calling of a paperboy. Each sound folded into the rhythm of ordinary life, yet it all seemed curiously transformed, as though we were hearing the world for the first time after it had remembered itself. Holmes sipped his coffee, his tone softening. You observed, of course, how Vale's presence first announced itself through cadence. 3 taps, measured and precise. I wonder whether that rhythm was his mind's last attempt to structure existence. When order fled him, he created his own substitute heartbeat. Perhaps in his way he was pleading for return. I said quietly, and we granted it by silence. By stillness, he corrected gently. Silence is absence. Stillness is control. Between the two lies the difference between despair and peace. He set his cup down and drew his bow across the violin's strings, testing their tone. Even an instrument echoes what it once knew. These strings remember vibration as nerves remember pain. He drew a single slow note, deep and resonant, that filled the room without breaking its calm. The sound lingered, merged with the faint hum of morning, and dissolved as naturally as breath. That, he said, is the closest man may come to immortality, to set something vibrating that endures after one has ceased to hear it. You think they achieved that? Involuntarily, he said. But every creation is at least half accident. I suspect their rhythm will recur in other forms, in machinery perhaps, or in the irregular ticking of clocks. Humanity will rediscover it and call it invention, unaware that it is repetition. He smiled then, faintly wistful. You may yet hear it in the future, Watson, and think me mad for suggesting it. I answered, You have made me think madness is a rather measured affair. Holmes chuckled softly. Then our night's labour has not been in vain. He replaced the violin in its case and drew the curtains wider. The light washed over the walls, revealing only the familiar brownstone comfort of Baker Street, the Persian slipper, the heap of papers, the untouched breakfast tray. The ordinary had reasserted itself, quietly triumphant. Yet in the far corner of the mantel I noticed something that gave me pause. A small, silvered speck upon the clock's brass face caught the sunlight and winked once, twice, 3 times in that old familiar rhythm. Holmes. He saw it too. For a moment we both stood perfectly still, and I half expected him to move again toward instruments and deduction. Instead, he only smiled, that rare, humane smile which softened his ascetic features. Let them be, he said. Every universe requires its signature. If theirs is rhythm, ours is reason, we may coexist in peace. He reached forward and gently stopped the clock's pendulum. The faint ticking ceased, and the room was utterly still. For several heartbeats there was nothing but the whisper of the fire and the distant carriage wheels beyond the fog. Then Holmes spoke once more, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. Watson, there are cases that end in punishment and those that end in understanding. I confess I prefer the latter. To see error transformed into knowledge is redemption enough. He turned back to the window. The sun had now risen fully, gilding the rooftops and glancing across the river beyond. For the briefest instant, a passing carriage threw a glint of light upon our window pane, a flash, no more. And in that glint I fancied I saw two shadows moving together, perfectly balanced, before the image dissolved back into sky. Holmes drew a breath. "Do you hear it?" I listened. The city hummed, the bells chimed 9, and beyond all that was the quietest sound of all the pulse of life resuming. He smiled faintly. "Good. That is the truest music. Let us leave science to its echoes and keep to our work among the living." He turned toward his chair, the familiar bulk of it welcoming his precision once more. "There will be a telegram before noon. London never allows reflection to last." I closed my notebook, for there was nothing more to record. The morning light lay across the rug like a new beginning, and the last vibration of the violin's note seemed to fade into it, completing its circle. Somewhere in the city, a clock struck 3 times distant, measured, gentle, and the sound was neither omen nor echo, but simply time continuing its patient course,